The empathy gap is the tendency to not be able to empathize properly, both in our understanding of ourselves and other people. It's funny. We'll talk about this several times over the course. We tend in many senses to have a more realistic understanding of other people than we do ourselves. We tend to think other people fall prey to cognitive biases, heuristics, etc., whereas we think of ourselves as thinking very rationally, very realistically. It turns out that that in and of itself is a very strong bias. So the empathy gap is you don't accurately empathize with how strong feelings somebody else may have, and even your own feelings. You may underestimate how strong your feelings actually are, or you may tell yourself, I don't have any feelings about this. I don't really feel one way or the other. But through a careful study, scientific experiment, a scientist could show that you actually do have a bias. You actually do have feelings about this thing. You're just not aware of it. And what this boils down to is this philosophical position, and you can go back to the Enlightenment, I think, therefore I am, and the separation of thought and feelings, which has basically been disproven in more recent years. Scientists now see thought and feeling as in many ways inextricably linked in the brain. But this separation it had positive roots, a positive intention. It was, we want to make our thinking pure and rational, and we want to weed out a lot of these emotional biases that creep into our thinking. So it was a good idea. The problem is people and cultures that have this sort, which is basically Western thought, and most of you watching this video are part of that community, where it's sort of baked into our culture, our language, everything. But the empathy gap is just that bias to underestimate our own emotions, other people's emotions, and to underestimate the power of emotion to sway people. I learned this when I was on the debate team. If you're in sales, you learn this. If you're a politician, you learn this. If you're a scientist and you want to affect policy in the government, you learn this. If you're part of a think tank, you learn this. If you invent some new medicine and you want to get doctors to adopt it, you learn that you have to appeal to people's emotions, because when you try the just logic route, it doesn't work. When you're an advertiser, you're trying to advertise the new book you just wrote, you're forced to learn these things. But because our culture is so systematically wrapped around this idea of we are rational creatures, we are different from animals, we have that extra level of rationality and we behave rationally, because we have that deep, deep cultural belief, it causes systematic bias like this, where we think other people are less emotional than they are. We believe we are less emotional than we are. And we consistently underestimate it. And we consistently underestimate how much we and other people are influenced by emotion. So that's the empathy gap.